Also, what? Fuck off. Hello friends, my name is Emily, I'm the Bi, and here are some books off of my bookshelf. So this is a quarterly wrap-up. I decided that this year I was gonna do quarterly wrap-ups instead of monthly wrap-ups, so I could give you kind of big numbers and things as like a whole thing. Also, in case there are months where I don't really read a lot, I thought it would be more fun to quantify data from 3 months instead of 1 month. I'm recording this, however, in chunks as the month finishes. This is mostly because when I asked Megan what she thought of me doing quarterly wrap-ups instead of monthly wrap-ups, she said, well, A, I like wrap-ups, and B, fair, and B, you're gonna forget all of the ways that you feel about things in the moment and whatnot. And I was like, you know, you're right. So I'm splitting the difference and I'm recording wrap-ups at the end of every month that I will compile into a big quarterly wrap-up that I will also do full stats for at the end of. Here are the books I read in January and a little breakdown of them. So my TBR for January I read all of, with the exception of one book which I thought was going to be true, which was My Favorite Half Night Stand by Christina Lauren. As I am recording this video, I'm about halfway through it, but right now I have finished every other book on my TBR and then some, because I have read in the month of January 17 books, including 3 rereads where I was finishing a manga series. I will say that most of the books I read during January were romance, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, and most of them were comics. Specifically manga, actually, which is kind of interesting. So the first book I read during January was Fence Volume 3 by C.S. Pacat and Joanna the Mad. I love this as always. It was an 8 out of 10 for me. Very enjoyable read. Can't wait to read the next one. They haven't kissed yet, which is just so infuriating, but the ending of volume 3 is like a very good cliffhanger. So the next book I read was American Queen by Sierra Simone, which is a retelling of the Arthurian myths, and hot. Loved it. It's an erotica with a polyamorous 3 bisexual couple. Love them. It's very reminiscent, the couple is, of the main polyamorous bisexual threesome in her other book series, A Lesson in Thorns, the Thorn Chapel series, but I think it's more interesting because they're a more like mature adult version, even though they're approximately a similar age. Although I think the 2 guys in this book are slightly older, but I love this. This was good. I am planning on reading the second one in February, which I'm sure I will talk about, and it's great. I already bought it. It's sitting on my TBR shelf. Very excited. Oh, it was a 7 out of 10. I thought it was very hot and I am very excited about it, and I will probably reread it. I would probably rec it to people, but there's some stuff that doesn't quite like work super well for me, or like could work better. So like 7 out of 10, but I do love it. The next comic I read was My Boyfriend is a Bear by Pamela Ribon and Kat Ferris. So this book is weird, and I knew it was going to be weird. It's a 6 out of 10. I really enjoyed the art style. The comic itself was like fun. I did read it in one sitting, but it's just a little too weird for me, I think. It's very sweet and romantic, but if the title, My Boyfriend is a Bear, works for you, you should read it. And if it doesn't, don't worry about it. Okay, so the next book I read was from a trip that me and my friends took to the little Japan town that's by, there's like a square of little Japanese markets and a grocery store, and there's like some ice cream shops and a bookstore where they sell mostly in Japanese books, but then they have an English section as well, so they have a bunch of new and used manga. They also had a little yaoi section, which was cool. So I bought a couple of yaoi manga from there, and one of them was this book called Free Fall Romance. It was very good. It was fun. 7 out of 10. It's about these 2 guys who, one of their brothers is going to an all-boys like high school, and he's like, but what if gay? And his friend is like, what if gay? And they get together and it's great. I love it. It's like one of those like vague panicky but like not panicky books, and it's very sweet. The sex scenes are good. I always forget that in a lot of Japanese manga, I don't know if this is true in Japan, but when it comes over, at least, they do censor like sexual organs during sex scenes. Like, sex scenes will exist, but also they're slightly censored. So it's like, I don't know, like a weird, interesting thing. But it's definitely a thing that I forgot about, and then I was like, oh yeah, okay. Okay, so next up I read volumes 6, 7, and 8 of Yuki Kaori's Godchild. So I finished rereading Godchild in January. I gave all of these 7 out of 10. Shocking, I know. The nostalgia value is real, but also, wow, shit just doesn't make sense. I don't know if I just was pretending it made sense when I was in middle school. I don't know. But the art is always beautiful. I am forever obsessed with Riff and Kane's relationship. I am forever sad that it's never consummated as being extremely queer, because wow. Nevertheless, these are fun. These are good. I just like, yo. I don't, why? Anyway. I read these. And then I started the one Yuki Kaori series that I own all of but have not read, which is Fairy Cube. So I read volume 1. I gave this a 6 out of 10 because yowza, this series didn't make any fucking sense. It was extremely hard to follow. The artwork is beautiful as always, but like, I was like reading it and I was like, wow, if I had read this in middle school, I'd probably still love it, but I didn't, and yike. Okay, next up was the first book that I buddy read. I read this with Megan. It was both of ours first Christina Lauren book. We read Twice in a Blue Moon. And I gave this a 5 out of 10. This is like a solid 2 out of 5 for me, honestly. I gave it a 5 out of 10, but yike at this book. It is a second chance romance where you get both parts of the second chance. So this book is about Tate. She meets this guy named Sam when she's 18 and he's like 20 or 21. They're both traveling in London on vacation with their grandparents, and they have like a whirlwind summer foreign romance, like European romance with each other, even though they're both American. Great. And Tate is holding on to a secret, which is that she is the long lost daughter of a very famous actor who, you know, exists, and she doesn't really talk to him, and it's like the secret that her and her family are holding. And then some things happen. She tells Sam, who is the main male love interest, that she is this man's daughter, and he ends up telling the press, and her entire life gets flipped upside down. And then we flash forward to her in her early 30s, probably 31 or 32, and she's a marginally famous actress. Basically, when Sam told the press that she was this man's daughter, sorry to that man, but he sucks, I don't care about his name, her entire life got flipped and turned upside down, and she had always wanted to be an actress, and so she was just like, okay, I guess this is happening. Like, I guess this is the time. So she became an actress. She starred on essentially a CW show and then has started doing movies as an adult, and she is about to film a movie for the first time with her father, where she's the lead and her father is like playing her father, and weird. It's always weird when people do that. Basically, she gets to set and realizes that the person who wrote the script is Sam. It's not good. It's just extremely boring. I don't think the characters, either of them, it's in first person from Tate's POV the entire time, and I don't like her at all. I don't get her, and I just didn't like her that much. I didn't really understand the appeal of Sam at all in either timeline. I didn't. And I don't think that the convention of the scripts inside, like they're doing scripts in the book, really works that well. Like, I understand what they were trying to do, and I think that if the scripts had been better written, then it would have done more for me. It would have worked the way I think they were intending it to, but lots of stuff just doesn't work in this. It's also very clear to me that neither women in Christina Lauren really understand filmmaking or don't care enough about it being accurate to write around it, because like there's a lot of drama with the way that films work. Like, the process of making a film works. There's a lot of drama, a lot of potential things that could be happening that they, I think, just don't understand and therefore didn't try to work in. So instead they're creating these other issues. Like, Sam is essentially a first-time writer. He's like written this movie that's about his grandparents, and by all accounts he's a first-time writer who has it in his contract that he gets final say on casting, which would never happen, and also is allowed to be, based on his contract, on set for sex scenes, which would also never happen. That's just not how that works. I don't know. It was not a good first foray into Christina Lauren books. Neither Megan nor I liked it, and I'm reading their other book. I'm liking it a lot more, actually. I think the characters are way more interesting, but I think the plot thing is gonna really bug me. So we'll see. I'm about to get into the thick of it. But I think after I read the Christina Lauren book that I'm currently reading, I think I'm gonna chill for a little bit. Next up, I read the comic Meal, which I talked about in my TBR video because this is one of the books that was actually on my TBR. I gave this a 7 out of 10. I liked it a lot. The art is extremely cute, the story is really good. It just didn't really connect with me the way I thought maybe it would, but I think that it is good. But I really want people to read this, so I will definitely be recommending it. I just don't think I'm probably gonna read it again. Okay, on that same trip to the Japanese bookstore, I also bought a yaoi anthology series called J-Boy, which is an anthology of short, sometimes explicit, sometimes not explicit, yaoi stories. It's also like a bunch of different colors, which is kind of weird, but like, okay. I gave this a 5 out of 10. Some of them were very good and I was into them, and I wish that it was like a whole manga series or like at least one manga. And some of them were weird or sucked or just like were not up my alley at all. So it's an anthology, so it's kind of a mixed bag. And then I read this book Replay, which was a manga that I got from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. And I really liked this one. It was a 9 out of 10 for me. It was a one-shot comic about two boys. They have retired from high school baseball and their relationship is kind of like falling apart a little bit. They're like best friends, and it's falling apart because they aren't playing baseball together anymore, but they still want to be together, and they are very much in love with each other. We love a friends to lovers trope, and this one is very sweet, very good. The art is gorgeous. The conclusion and like the climax of all of it was very good. I really, really enjoyed reading it. The next book I read was volume 2 of Fairy Cube by Yuki Kaori. This I gave a 7 out of 10 to. Again, art is gorgeous. It's confusing. I think this one makes more sense somehow. I don't know. It's more interesting. I don't know. It's a weird series. Spoiler alert, it's not my favorite. Okay, the next book I read was At the End of the Tether, which is a comic book that I also got from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. I gave it a 7 out of 10. It has a lot of like time travel stuff going on. I don't know, it's really interesting. It's a love story that is told in multiple time periods. The like time travel-y stuff, it's basically like one person in the couple is unstuck in time, essentially. Very Billy Pilgrim of them. And I really liked it. The art style is good and interesting. The way that it ends up making sense, like the beginning is the future and then it kind of goes back. The way it circularly makes sense really worked for me, and I ended up really liking this comic. The next book I read was also an ebook from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review, and it was Deko Boko Sugar Days, which was also very cute. Friends to lovers, a very sweet comic. I gave it an 8 out of 10 about two friends who have been friends since they were kids, and the main character is like sort of jealous at the fact that the character who he's very clearly in love with, who's his best friend, became much taller than him, even though he was shorter when they were kids. And he has sort of a complex about it, which I think is why he doesn't realize that the reason he's so obsessed with him is because he's in love with him. And it's just very sweet and I like it a lot. I wasn't 100% sure that I would like it because the art style of the main character, like the way that his face looks, isn't like appealing to me personally, but he's kind of the only one who looks like that, which I think is interesting, and it actually ends up working really well in the comic itself, not just like in the still image of the cover. All right, the next book I read was my second buddy read, which I read with Patches, and we did a whole video about it because we decided to start a book club based on us buddy reading a book every month called the Backlist Book Club. Come join us, talk to us about things. The first book of that was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So we had a whole video about this. You can go watch all of our thoughts and opinions on that. I actually really liked this book. I was shocked. I had never read a Leigh Bardugo, so I had no expectations of her actual writing style or the things that would happen. I wasn't into it at first. I couldn't really get that into it, but I ended up really liking it enough to give it an 8 out of 10, so. And then finally, the last book I read was volume 3 of Fairy Cube by Yuki Kaori. What can I say? I just wanted to finish the series before the month ended, and I did. I read this, I think I finished it on the 31st, so gotta sneak that in. That was my January wrap-up. In a couple of seconds, you will see my February wrap-up, but it will be an entire month for me. I hope I did good. Hello, it is March 1st. So I think it's about time to talk about the books I read during the month of February. There were 8 of them. About half of them were comics, a thing I didn't plan on reading, but just kind of happened, and a couple other things. Some stuff I planned, some stuff I didn't. Let's get into it. So the first book I finished during February was My Favorite Half-Night Stand by Christina Lauren. This was a book that I started during January. It was part of my January TBR where I was reading a bunch of romance. This was the second Christina Lauren book I've ever read, and you know, I don't know that I'm a huge fan. I think it's fine. I like this one a lot more than Twice in a Blue Moon, which is the one that I finished in January that I was buddy reading with Megan. I think that the characters are more interesting in this. I think the writing is more interesting. I don't like the plot because I don't like lying as part of a relationship. That's not fun for me. This is a solid 6 out of 10. I think I'm gonna try to read one more of the adult Christina Lauren books, and then no matter what, I'm going to give autobiography a chance because I think that will speak to me. I also think that their writing style might actually be better suited for YA in terms of like sex appeal. I don't know, is that controversial? Probably. Sorry. The next book I read was American Prince by Sarah Simone. This is the second book in the new Camelot series, which is an erotic retelling, reimagining of King Arthur, but it's American and their president and VP and first lady. It's a throuple situation with Guinevere and Arthur and Mordred, but Mordred in the earlier myth where he's not related to Arthur, so it's not incest. There is incest in this though, but you know, okay. This was fun and emotional and sexy. It's from the Mordred character's POV and I liked it a lot. This gets a 9 out of 10 for me because it was just exactly what I wanted, exactly what I needed. Love this for me. So the next thing I read was a comic. It was the first of the comics that I read this month, and it was When I Arrived at the Castle by Emily Carroll. I recently made a video about Emily Carroll comics. I loved it. I was waiting basically to read this before I made that video because this was the last of her written and illustrated stories that have been officially published that I hadn't read. So I finally read it and I really loved it. I think this is a very good place to start if you want to get into Emily Carroll horror comics because it's not particularly bloody, it's not particularly scary, like bone chilling like some of her other comics, but it is a good taste of kind of what she does. There is some nudity, there is blood, but you know, it's not crazy, and it's just a really interesting twisty story, which is Emily Carroll out the ass. So this gets an 8 out of 10 for me because while it is not my favorite Emily Carroll comic, it's still an Emily Carroll comic. So 8 out of 10. The next book I read in February was a book that I didn't actually intend to read during the month, but I borrowed it from Patches and I had like a 6-day break in the middle of the month for various reasons, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna read it. So I read it during that break in its entirety. It was very good. It's My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. So I really liked this book. I give it a solid 7 out of 10. It was exactly what I wanted to read. It kind of did exactly what I not necessarily thought it would do, but hoped it would do. I really like the vignette storytelling. I adore her writing style, both that it's extremely to the point, but also emotional. I don't know, like the characters are just so absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to read whatever she writes next. I was also excited to read something that both wasn't set in the US and wasn't written by someone from the US, which is something that I have been bad about forever and would like to get better at. So the next book I read was something I had been waiting for forever because I kickstarted it 1,000 years ago, it feels like, but it finally came out. It exists. I have it in my hands. I read it. It was my only 10 out of 10. It might be my only 10 out of 10 this whole year so far, but that is Hard Drive Volume 2 by ArtRoan. This is a story about a spaceship of space bandits. They basically get hired to go steal shit. It's very Firefly-esque, but if Firefly were queer and everything I ever wanted. Basically, I just fully love this series and all of his art. I will link his Twitter and his shop down below. Go and read and look at and buy all of his things. I adore him. The next book I read was Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I read this for Backlist Book Club for February, and I have a video up here if you would like to see what me and Patches fully thought of it. That's a long video of us only talking about Pretty Girls. I liked this okay. This is fine. There's a lot of fucked up shit going on, but also it's not surprising. I don't know, like it's just fine. I don't know if I actually like reading thrillers, which is something I'm coming to terms with, whether or not that's true. So I think I'm gonna try to read a couple more. I borrowed some from Patches, so I'm gonna see how I feel about that. This is like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 for me. Probably leaning more towards 6. It definitely is something I couldn't really put down, but also shrug? I don't know. The next book I bought, because I have been dying to read it, I saw it at the used bookstore that I go to by my work, where I finally sold some of my books. All of the books that I unhauled at the very beginning of this channel have basically just been sitting in the corner. This is the spare room, by the way. I bought another shelf and now I like it a lot. But they've been sitting in the corner of the spare room and I haven't done anything with them. So I finally sold a chunk of them, like a good chunk of them actually, and had a bunch of trade credit at the used bookstore by my work. And so when I saw this, I knew I had to spend some of that on it. And it's the first volume of Cosmo Nights by Hannah Templer. This was a webcomic and I could have read it online. I don't think I really knew that before I bought it and read it, but I really enjoy this. This was so good. It's queer as hell. Literally, the opening of the summary is, for this ragtag band of space gays, liberation means beating the patriarchy at its own game. I love this. I love the story. It's about a galaxy where planets have princesses. They have royal families. Every planet essentially does. And the princesses are then essentially sold, won in a joust, and then the sponsors of the knights who are doing the jousts do whatever with the princesses, and everyone's like, well, that fucking sucks. And so it's about a group of people, some of whom are jousters, some of whom are related to, not related to princesses, but have been entangled in princess lives, and they're just trying to liberate all the princesses by winning all the jousts. And I love it. It's great. It's amazing. The art is stunning. It's so pretty. The colors, oh, the colors. You can read it online. I'll link it down below. It's very good. I also forgot, so technically I guess I read 9 books, that I read enough of Heartstopper by Alice Oseman to have read volume 1. So I read this on Tapas. I didn't read this as like an ebook, or I didn't read this physically, but at some point I will buy them physically because I really love this series. It is a solid like 9 out of 10 for me, I think. And while I know that people probably know this, I am obsessed with the fact that her novels Solitaire and Radio Silence, which has been the book that everyone has recommended and that I think I will love, are set in the same universe as Heartstopper. That's amazing. That's the kind of thing I want to do as a writer and creator, to like be like, surprise, it's a connected universe. Joke's on you. I love that. It's one of my favorite things. It's the reason why I've kept so many of my Brest and Illis books, because they're all set in the same universe and it just fulfills something in me. Okay, so the last book that I read, I also borrowed from Patches, and I was thinking I might read it in February, and then I did. And it's mostly because a couple of the books that I read in February, or were going to read in February, I just either couldn't get into, or like other things happened, aka A Darker Shade of Magic, which I started but didn't get that far into, but I will be reading soon. I just don't know when. I just didn't really want to read novel fantasy right now, I think is what happened. I'm gonna try to do sci-fi in March because I also want to write something sci-fi, so I would like to consume a couple of sci-fi things. But I wanted a contemporary romance, and that's what I got. I read The Bromance Book Club by Lisa K. Adams, and I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about this book. and that's just the truth. I don't think I'm a particularly huge fan of second chance romance. This, like Christina Lauren, like thrillers, are things that I think I need to read a little bit more of to kind of see if that's true or if I've just been reading the wrong things. I don't know anymore if I don't like second chance romance. I think the whole thing is that I like second chance romance when you see both parts of the romance, when you see how they first came together and then you see how they're coming together again, because then I feel like you really understand all of them. I say that, but then like the two I've read, this one does less of that, and I like this one more because the other one I read was the Christina Lauren book, and I hate that book. It's bad. I don't like it, and I'm sad that I read it. But this, I think, is very good. I think it could have used a little bit more of the first part of their romance, but I think it handles it pretty well. Once I kind of got into the machinations of like what was going on in the story and who these characters are, I really, really liked it. I really adore her writing style. I liked all of the characters. Her world building is good. The way she writes sex scenes is really good. It's explicit, but it isn't quite erotica. It's, you know, a sex scene, which is kind of my problem with Christina Lauren books. It just isn't enough, or when it is vaguely explicit, it's just like not sexy, and I'm like, well, that's not fun. But these are extremely fun. The only thing I think I would have changed, and it's not even like that I don't like this, because I actually do. Because he's reading this book called Courting the Countess, we get pages from that book, which I think is fine. I know a lot of people have lots of feelings about that. I think it works in this book. I think a lot of people complain about it in Fangirl. I don't mind it in Fangirl. I think it's a little not great, but it doesn't like hinder the story for me. I know a lot of people think it does, and that's fine. I can also see where they're coming from on that front, because nothing in the story leads to that, versus he's actually reading the book, which makes sense, you know? But I wish that we had gotten a little bit more backstory in that book about those characters, because reading just segments of it kind of was a little confusing about what was actually going on in the plot of the book he was reading. But overall, I think it works generally pretty well, and I liked it a lot. I really liked it. I'm excited to read the sequel, and I want to read her other books. She writes a lot of baseball books, which like, I think I'm into. I think I'm really into that. This is all Pitch's fault. Please go and watch the first and only season of Pitch from Fox, because it's wow. Hi friends. March felt like an entire decade. I've been working at home for about 3 weeks. Safe at Home in California has been in place for 2 or 3 weeks. There's no street parking tickets, which is nice, but everything else sucks. It all sucks very badly. No good. Don't like living through a world event. That being said, I did get 14 books, mostly comics, mostly manga, read during the month of March, and I'm gonna talk about them. And then at the end of me talking about the books I specifically read in March, I'm going to talk about the entire breakdown of all the books I've read since the beginning of 2020. So the first thing I read in March was Heartstopper Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. I read this online on Tapas as I read the first volume and, sneak peek, the third volume. I will link down below so you can go and read it. Super accessible and easy to read on Tapas. If you read it on Tapas, she gets money for that, so go and read it on Tapas. And also you can buy the physical copies of it if you're one of those people, which I am, and I will buy them at some point. I really like this story. I'm gonna say the same thing basically that I did for volume 1. I'm gonna say the same thing for volume 3. I think this series is actually almost over, but it is a really good, extremely heartwarming, and also like sometimes, you know, stressful, because it is very much a truthful feeling story about what it's like to be a queer teen, and I connect to it so much. And also they're just so cute. I love them. The next book I read was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Wong. This book is Own Voices for Autism and is about an autistic woman who ends up hiring and then, whoops, falling in love with a male escort. It's great. I really love this book. It's so good. The sex scenes are really well written, pretty frequent, and happen pretty immediately. So yeah, I really liked this book. It's a solid 8 out of 10 for me. I just started reading The Bride Test, her second book, and I'm really liking it a lot as well. So very excited. Okay. So the next book I read was the first like novel, because the first thing that I gave a 10 out of 10 to was a comic by ArtRoan, but this is the first novel. And actually, this month I had kind of a good month where I ended up giving 2 books 10 out of 10, and with the exception of one book, which I will talk about in a moment, most of my ratings are 8s and above. So it actually was a good reading month. But the first 10 out of 10 that I gave this month was This Is How You Lose the Time War. This was written by Amal El Mohar and Max Gladstone, and this is about 2 different agents who are on different sides of the Time War. And it's told like half epistolary, where they're writing each other letters and falling deeply in love, and it's very good. The science is about the level that like I want it to be, where it's not overly explaining the sci-fi stuff, but it's there enough that you can kind of piece together what the worlds must be like, and I just really loved this. It's beautifully poetic. Red and blue are just the goats of female protagonist. Oh yeah, did I mention it's gay as hell? Love this for all of us. Anyway, this is a 10 out of 10. And while I borrowed this copy from Megan, I will be buying my own soon. Don't you worry, when all of this is over. Yikes. However, the next book that I read, which I thought would be really fun, and was not, was Top Secret. This was written by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy, and I have never read any of their other books. I know that him and I think its sequel, Us, are really well regarded. This is bad and I don't like it. And I was gonna record a whole video talking about why I don't like it, but it was exhausting to just talk about how much I really didn't like this book. I gave this book a 5 out of 10. I think on Goodreads I gave it a 3, I rounded up, but no, it's not good. It's not good. I don't like this. A lot of people love this. This feels like, and I have no idea if Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy are straight, but it does feel like it was written by straight women writing queer stuff in like 2003 or like 2004. Like it feels like an early aughts straight women writing gay stuff story, and I don't like that. It's also cringy in a way that I don't think it means to be. At least it's cringy to me, and I just didn't find this enjoyable almost at all. I didn't even find their banter enjoyable. Anyway, this is a book about 2 frat brothers who end up because one of their girlfriends wants to have a threesome for her birthday, and so they end up chatting on like a hookup app to sort that out, and they don't know who they are in real life. They don't like each other, and they are competing for the presidency of their frat. Cool. These are things I should like, and I just don't. 5 out of 10. I don't want to keep this in my life. The next book I read was Heartstopper Volume 3 by Alice Oseman. This was also a 9 out of 10. Again, I just really love Heartstopper. I think it is superb, very good. Lots of stuff is happening. I'm now fully caught up on Heartstopper, and I'm like, truly, what is gonna happen? The next book that I read was Orpheus Girl by Bren Rebel Henry. This book I actually really liked. I gave it an 8 out of 10. I do think it is deeply sad, but kind of hopeful in parts. I thought that it would be more poetically written because I know that she is a poet, and this is, I think, her first novel. It's also extremely short, but it's actually pretty starkly written and pretty bluntly written, which I think works, but is not what I was really expecting when I started reading it. I did read it in like a day or 2, and like, man, excuse me, ouch. Would recommend, but it has conversion therapy stuff in it. This is about a girl in, I think 2004 is when the author said that it takes place, who falls in love with her best friend, who is in love with her as well, but they live in Texas. It's 2004. And the best friend's parents, like her dad is the reverend of the church, and so when they get caught doing sexy stuff, they both end up getting sent separately to a conversion camp, and bad stuff, because conversion camp, it's not But I'm a Cheerleader, it's more Miseducation of Cameron Post, which I also have thoughts on. But this was very good, extremely sad. It ends hopefully, but also sad. It's sad. 8 out of 10. So the next book that I read was Beastars Volume 1. This is a manga series that has recently been turned into an anime series that in America you can watch on Netflix. The first season is out and I have watched all of it and then started reading the manga. So at the beginning of the month I was watching the anime and then I have proceeded to read the manga a lot. A whole lot. This is a story set in a world where there are anthropomorphic animals. There are no humans, they're just animals, but you know, they have like full society, they wear clothes, etc. The species are split essentially between carnivores and herbivores, but there's also like reptiles and like sea animals and whatever, various types of things split within that, but it's very Zootopia. A lot of people have called it Zootopia that fucks, which is not entirely wrong, so there's that. But Beastars specifically is set at a high school that is like a boarding school that is integrated where herbivores and carnivores live together, and some of it is actually integrated and some of it is not. So some of the clubs are not and some of them are. And one of the clubs that is integrated is the drama club. So most of the main characters are drama students, which, I mean, it's just so extra. I love it. The main character is a giant gray wolf who is named Lugosi. It's a play on Bela Lugosi's name, and I love him. He big and scary but soft and want to protect, and that's great. It's a good main character. The other main characters include Haru, or dwarf rabbit, and Louis the red deer, and there's like a weird love triangle thing going on. There's like some mafia stuff going on. There's like secret back alley meat market stuff going on because eating meat in the society is illegal in order to maintain, you know, civility. And the story starts when one of the drama club members, a herbivore, an alpaca named Tem, is murdered, presumably by another member of the drama club who's a carnivore, and is eaten. And that's where the story starts. And you know what? If that's not for you, that's fine. But my friend made me watch the fucking first 2 episodes of the anime before D&D before we started fully self-isolating, and then I just couldn't stop watching it. Now I read the manga, so here we are. The other actual book that I read this month was Wilder Girls by Rory Power, which I fucking loved. This is the other 10 out of 10 book for me. This is about a group of girls who are at a boarding school quarantined because a virus has affected the island that they're on. And so they are quarantined to the school. They have a lot of like mutations going on. The main character's eye is fused shut. One of the other main characters has like a claw arm scale thing going on, and then the other main character has 2 spines. It's wild. This book is really fucking good, and it is exactly my brand. Like, if you need to know what kind of horror, body, gore shit I'm into, it's this. This is the level. This is it. And then because I'm not gonna specifically get into all the plots of Beastars, I did read volumes 2 through 7 at the end of March. The first like 6 or like 5.5 volumes follow the anime, so like that was really quick because it's essentially almost the exact same story as the anime. And then once I finished the first 5.5 to 6 volumes, I hit new stuff that hadn't yet been adapted to the anime, and here we go. We're in it to fucking win it, y'all. Okay, so having talked about all the books I read in March, let's talk about the stats for all of the books I've read from January, February, and March. I have my handy dandy computer, so let's just do a very brief overview of what I have been reading. Over the last 3 months, I've read 40 books. I've read a shit ton of comics. They have mostly been comics. I think the percentage is like 70 something. Oh God. I have been 100% reading fiction. I haven't read any nonfiction this year. I have read about 50-ish%. It's about 50-50, maybe a little more towards print and digital. So I've read a little bit more print, but because I've been reading a lot of comics digitally, especially the manga, that has really upped my digital reading, which has been kind of fun. I have mostly been reading young adult because despite Beastars being Zootopia that fucks, it is technically still young adult. Like, I would put it in a young adult category, which is mostly because you're not actively seeing sex. It's kind of more romance. I've mostly been reading comics, like I said. The genre I've been reading, I don't know what to put Beastars under, so I've been putting it under general fiction. wild. So general fiction and romance are my two biggest categories. They're about 30-ish%, give or take, a piece. I have been exclusively reading backlist books. I haven't read anything that's come out this year so far. I've also mostly been reading books I've either already owned or that are available free online in some way, like Heartstopper or Beastars, which I'm reading through scans. So let's talk about star rating. Star rating, I have mostly given 4 stars, which I think has a lot to do with Beastars because every volume of it I've given a 4-star because it's like there and I like it. But I have given a couple of 2.5 stars, 4 to be exact, and I have given 3 5 stars. So my guess is that my actual average is somewhere in the 3 point something range, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. I read the most books in January with a total of 17, and then I read 9 in February and 14 in March. So I actually was kind of killing it, you know. Most of the books I have read have been by female authors, and then because I have been reading so much manga, the nation of origin for most of the books I've been reading has actually been Japan for most of them. It's almost 50%. The US is obviously coming in second at like 37, 35%, but Japan is up there. And that's just because I'm reading a lot of manga, which also means that I'm reading a lot of translated fiction as well, and fiction by people of color, specifically women of color. And then collectively, between comics and novels, I've read 9,309 pages of stuff, which is wild. In fact, right now, because I'm looking at my live page total, I've read over 10,000 pages this year, and it's only April 4th. So that's cool. Anyway, I think towards the end of the year, or like maybe in January of next year, I'm going to do a significantly more detailed version of the breakdown of everything that I read during 2020, a la Books and Lala. But I hope that you enjoyed this quarterly wrap-up. I think that I like doing quarterly wrap-ups, although I've never really done any wrap-ups consistently, so that makes sense. But I think I like the quarterly wrap-ups because it gives both you and me a more detailed snapshot of what my year in reading is like, because I'm looking at 3 samples instead of 1 and then 1 and then 1 and looking at them separately. I get to look at them all together, which is kind of fun. I think that's neat.